Okay, hi, good afternoon. Okay, today I will start my presentation with title Anatomy of the Heart. Okay, I'll try to go slow as I can. Okay, okay. So what is heart basically? So heart is just a muscular organ that pumps blood involuntarily to all the tissues in the body through a network of blood vessels, which is divided into arteries and veins, and they are called as cardiovascular system. So, so it lies between two lungs in the middle of the chest, just behind and slightly to the left of the sternum or breastbone, you can call it. So, so the heart is enclosed within the mediastinum, which is the medial cavity of the thorax. So it consists of 4 chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. Basically, right atrium, left atrium, and right ventricle and left ventricle. So there, it consists of 5 blood vessels for the transportation of the blood, and there are also valves to ensure the flow of the blood in one direction, so there will be no backflow. Moving on to the coverings and walls of the heart. So the heart is enclosed in a double wall sac known as pericardium. So what is pericardium? Pericardium is a thick, tough membranous fluid-filled sac that surrounds the heart. So it functions to stabilize the heart within the mediastinum. So and it composed of 2 layers, which are called fibrous pericardium and serous pericardium. So the fibrous pericardium, it is a tough, dense connective tissue layer which functions to protect the heart, to anchor it to the surrounding structures, and to prevent overfilling of the heart with blood. As for serous pericardium, it composed of 2 layers, which is the parietal layer, which is lined to the fibrous pericardium, and also the visceral layer. Well, it's classically also known as epicardium, which is the outer layer of the walls, and it's the integral part of the wall. So, and in between the parietal and visceral layer, there is a pericardial cavity right here. So, in that cavity, it contains a film of serous fluid, which is called as pericardial fluid. It functions as a lubricant to allow the heart to work frictionlessly, so that the membranes will slide smoothly past one another. So moving on to the wall, the heart wall. The heart wall consists or composed of 3 layers, which are epicardium, the outer layer, myocardium, the inner layer, or the middle layer, sorry, and the inner layer, which is called endocardium. So the epicardium, it is a thin visceral layer of the serous pericardium, or we can call it as a visceral layer. And then the middle layer, myocardium, myo, which is muscle, or myocardium muscle heart, you can call that. It's the middle layer, and the thickest layer composed of cardiac muscles, which is called cardiomyocytes, and it forms the bulk of the heart. So basically, this layer, this wall, the myocardium, this is that contracts. So it makes the heart beat, basically. And then the inner layer, which is called the endocardium, it's the inner layer which lines the heart chambers and covers the fibrous skeleton of the valves. Okay, now, I mean, am I going too fast?
Is it too fast?
A bit fast.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah, because I usually present. Okay, I'll go slow. Okay, chambers and blood vessels. Okay, so the heart is divided into 4 chambers. As we know, 2 superior atria, the right atrium and the left atrium, and 2 inferior ventricles, the left and the right ventricles. So the internal partition. So basically, there is a division, which basically divides the atria and the ventricles, which is called a septum here. So this is the septum. It's a wall of muscle. It's a wall of muscle. So it separates basically the blood in the chamber and in the two chambers from mixing. The right side of the heart, so of the right chambers, they contain the oxygenated blood, and for the left chambers, the left side of the heart contain oxygenated blood. So we will talk about the atria first. So what is atria? It is the receiving chambers for blood. So it is relatively small in size, and it's a thin-walled chambers. So the deoxygenated blood entering the right atrium via three veins. They are superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and coronary sinus. So for the superior vena cava, it carries blood from body regions superior to the diaphragm, upper part of the body. For the inferior vena cava, it carries blood, deoxygenated blood from body regions inferior, the lower part of the body, inferior to the diaphragm. And as for coronary sinus, it collects blood draining from the myocardium. So the third one will include in the coronary circulation, circulation. So the oxygenated blood from the lungs enter the left atrium through pulmonary veins. Okay, so move on to the ventricles. Just now we talk about atria, and then we talk about ventricles. So a ventricle, ventricles are the discharging chambers for blood, and the walls are much more thicker and massive. Why? It's because it has to pump blood to all parts of the body. Okay? And the right ventricle pump blood to the lungs via pulmonary trunk, where gas exchange occurs. So pulmonary trunk, it will be divided into two arteries, pulmonary arteries, left pulmonary arteries and right pulmonary artery. So they will go to right lung and left lung. Okay. So the left ventricle ejects blood via aorta, the largest artery in the body, into systemic circulation. Systemic circulation means that the blood is pumped to all parts of the body. Okay, and hence that's why it has a much thicker wall. So because it contains high pressure. Okay, the blood vessels. So they are actually 5 blood vessels that enter and leave the heart. The superior vena cava, the role, it transports the oxygenated blood from upper region of the body to the right atrium. Inferior vena cava, transport the oxygenated blood from lower region of the body to the right atrium. The pulmonary trunk, transport the oxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs for oxygenation, so that the oxygenated blood will be oxygenized, okay, via the pulmonary trunk. And pulmonary veins will transport oxygenated blood back to the heart, to the left atrium. And the last one is aorta, the large artery, will transport oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to all parts of the body, which is called the systemic circulation. Okay, moving on to valves. So there are 4 valves in the heart, which open and close in response to differences in the blood pressure. So they consist of 2 and 3 ventricular valves and semilunar valves. So for the atrioventricular valves, there are 2 valves, which is a tricuspid valve, the right AV valve, and the mitral, or you can call it bicuspid valve, the left AV valve. So they are located at each atrial ventricular junction to prevent backflow into the atria when the ventricles contract. That's the diagram. Bicuspid and bicuspid. Okay, this is the schematic diagram. So for the A diagram, so when the heart is relaxed, or when the ventricles relax, the AV valve flaps hang limply into the ventricular chambers. So at this time, or during this time, the blood flows into the atria through the open AV valve. So when AV valve open, when the atrial pressure is greater than the ventricular pressure. As for the diagram B, when the ventricles contract, compressing the blood in the chambers, the pressure rises, forcing the blood superiorly against the valve flaps, which resulting to the closing of the valve. So when AV valve is closed, the atrial pressure is less than ventricular pressure. So semiluna valves, the same as atrioventricular valve, consists of two valves, aortic and pulmonary valves. As for this one, as ventricles contract and interventricular pressure rises, blood is pushed up against semiluna valves, forcing them to open. It's the action is opposite to the atrioventricular valve. So basically, when ventricles contract, every valves, atrioventricular valves will close and the semiluna will open. But when ventricle is relaxed, the AV will open, the ventricular valves will open, and the semiluna valves will close. So they are actually opposing one another. So this is the schematic diagram for the blood flow of the flow of the blood from superior vena cava, from the opposite superior vena cava to the right atrium, and then to the right ventricle, to the via the pulmonary trunk for oxygenation, and then return back to the left atrium via the pulmonary veins, and then to the left ventricle and pump via the aorta to all parts of the body. Okay, moving on to the cardiac circulation or coronary circulation. So although the heart is continuously filled with blood, this actually provides little nourishment to the heart. So there must be another effort to give nourishment to the heart. So this is called through the coronary circulation. It is the shortest circulation so that the heart will get its nourishment. So the left and right coronary arteries provide arterial supply for the circulation. The left coronary arteries runs toward the left side of the heart and then divides into two major branches, which are called the anterior interventricular artery and the circumflex artery. So the anterior interventricular artery follows the anterior interventricular sulcus and supplies blood to the interventricular septum and anterior walls of both ventricles. The name is quite hard to. And the second one is the circumflex artery. It supplies the left atrium and the posterior walls of the left ventricle. As for the right coronary arteries, it also gives rise to two branches, which are the right marginal artery and the posterior interventricular artery. The right marginal artery serves the myocardium, the muscle tissue in the heart. And then the posterior interventricular artery, it runs to the heart apex and supplies the posterior ventricular walls. Near the apex of the heart, this artery merges, combine, anastomas, with the anterior interventricular artery. That is for coronary arteries, and this one is for coronary veins. After passing through the capillary beds of the myocardium, the venous blood is collected by the cardiac veins. So these veins join to form an enlarged vessel called the coronary sinus, which empties the blood into the right atrium. So the sinus is divided into three large tributaries. The first one is the great cardiac vein in the anterior interventricular sulcus. The second one is the middle cardiac vein in the posterior interventricular sulcus. And the third one is the small cardiac vein running along the heart's inferior margin. So several anterior cardiac veins empty directly into the right atrium anteriorly. So basically that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Sorry. Yeah.
There are a lot of very maybe new words and a lot of things to memorize and remember. But you mentioned very important things. Probably we will continue reviewing them in the rest of the class. Any particular point that was not very clear? Everything?
Sorry. Yeah, I went so fast. Sorry.
It's okay. You did a very good job. Thank you very much. So the slides were actually good because you included many things. It's difficult if you just tell them, to speak them, because it's difficult to catch it the first time maybe.
Oh, yeah.
New words and complex explanations. So it's good if we put everything in the slide, and then not only you can read and it facilitates your presentation, but also for them to read. So while you are presenting, they can read what part you're explaining, right? This is for all of you for your own presentations, okay? So it's okay to put. In other circumstances, maybe I would suggest not to write too much on the slide. Maybe just a picture, and then you can explain. But because it's English, it's not our language, it's a new area, new topic. None of us probably may be familiar with the terminology. So it's better to put everything in this slide. It's okay. You did a very good job. Your slides were nice. Some of them we will see them again in the rest of the class. And I will try to point out the things that I would like for you to remember. Okay? Especially to remember. So we have seen from his presentation, actually the heart and the cardiovascular system is quite complex. Here are the handouts, if you need them. This is from his presentation, this is for the rest of the class. If you couldn't swap your ID, here is the list. So put your name. Yes, thank you. So as he mentioned, the heart is actually a pump, right? And this heart has to pump blood so that all the cells in our body can receive nutrients, and can dispose of the waste products. So it's a lot of work for this small organ. The body usually will have around 5 or 6 liters of blood, and imagine this heart will have to pump this over maybe 1,000 times per day. So it's a lot of work. So we already know the cardiovascular system is a closed system. Okay, it's a closed system consisting of the heart and the blood vessels. Okay, everything is connected. The heart is pumping the blood and it's circulating throughout the blood vessels. The heart will pump the blood vessels will allow the blood to circulate to all body parts. The main functions of the cardiovascular system to deliver oxygen and nutrients to cells and tissues. Okay, very basic idea, the main function. And not only to provide the oxygen and nutrients, but also to remove the carbon dioxide and any other waste products from the cells and the tissue metabolism. Okay, so we need to bring and then take. About the conduction system, we're going to see all these in a very simple way. You review this also when you were studying the muscular system, right? And about the types of muscle cells. The heart consists of muscle cells, and they will contract spontaneously and independently, even without the nerve impulses. But the contraction they have, the basic contraction, is not enough to pump all the blood throughout their body. They will contract in a regular and continuous way, but different areas will have different rhythms. And we want all the heart to contract all together so that the blood can circulate harmoniously, right? This is just as a reference. You remember what was the atrial and ventricular? When he was mentioning the right atrium, the left atrium, he mentioned there are 4 chambers in the heart, right? Chambers are these spaces that will collect the blood. So basically, the heart will be from approximately the size of your fist, and we will have 4 chambers. The upper chambers are known as the left and the right atrium, depending if they're on the left or the right side, atrium or atria, if it's plural or singular. And the lower chambers are the ventricles. We also have the left and the right ventricles. And the cells in the atrium will contract approximately 60 beats per minute, while the ventricular cells will contract slightly slower. So we need a conduction system, a system that synchronizes all these beats together, right? So that the heart will contract at the same time on the cells. So we have these 2 conduction systems. One is the intrinsic conduction system and then the autonomic nervous system. The intrinsic system, also called the nodal system, will make the heartbeat to around 75 beats per minute. And the autonomic system, this is part of the nervous system. That we basically will either increase your heart rate or will decrease the heart rate. Okay? What are the main elements of the intrinsic conduction system? So this system will set the basic rhythm of the contractions. And an important elements here are the sinoatrial node here. This is where the depolarization or the contraction will start. The depolarization will start here, depolarizing the cells, and when it reaches the atrioventricular node, depolarization will continue throughout the branches. Okay? We have the atrioventricular node, which is between the atriums and ventricular. We'll continue to the atrioventricular bundle or bundle of His. And then these His, which comes in the septum, will divide to the right and to the left, into the right and left branches, okay, and ultimately into the Purkinje fibers that goes deep into the muscular, into the muscles. This is a special tissue and it's built into the heart tissue, so it's within the heart tissue. And this will cause the heart muscle to depolarize, and it depolarizes only in one way, okay, from here to the apex of the heart. This is the apex, okay. Starts here and depolarizes in this way, and then through the branches. Contraction starts in the sinoatrial node. This will set the pace for the whole heart. So it's also called a pacemaker. From here, it will reach the atrioventricular node. From the atrioventricular node, it continues to the bundle. From the bundle to the left and right branches, and from there to the Purkinje fibers, deep into the ventricle muscles. Okay, and depolarization can reach the ventricles only by traveling through these nodes. Of course, there could be some abnormalities if there are any damages at any point of this system. If there's a damage, for example, in the sinoatrial node, the heart rate will slow down. Okay. If we have a damage to the atrioventricular node, we could have the control of the ventricles could be total or partially released, so they will not contract at the same time. The ventricles may beat at their own rate. It could be much lower. He already explained about the cardiac cycle, how the heart will get full of blood, it will contract, and it will expel all this blood through the great vessels. So I want you to watch this video. Just keep in mind that when we explain how the cardiac cycle is, we usually explain as Keith did. Blood will come and fill in the atrium, will go to the ventricle, this will contract, will go to the lung, will come back again, etc. But all this happens at the same time. So both atriums will contract at the same time and the ventricles also at the same time. Just for learning purposes, we explain it step by step. Okay? So watch carefully the video.
This animation illustrates a single cardiac cycle, starting with the right side of the heart. In reality, of course, the two sides of the heart work together at the same time, but it is easier to understand if we look at them separately, because each side of the heart has a different function. The cardiac cycle begins as deoxygenated blood flows from the body into the right atrium via the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. In the next phase of the cycle, the right atrium contracts, pumping blood into the right ventricle through the tricuspid valve. Once the right ventricle fills with blood, the tricuspid valve closes to prevent blood flowing back into the atrium. The right ventricle contracts, forcing the pulmonary valve to open as blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery. Blood then travels to the lungs and the pulmonary valve closes. At the same time, the right atrium relaxes, ready to accept the next intake of blood. In the lungs, the blood picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Oxygenated blood flows from the lungs into the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. The left atrium contracts to pump blood into the left ventricle through the mitral valve. Once the left ventricle has filled with blood, the mitral valve closes. Next, the left ventricle contracts, forcing the aortic valve to open, allowing blood to be pumped into the aorta, and from there around the body. The aortic valve closes to prevent blood flowing back into the left ventricle, and the left ventricle relaxes, ready to accept the next intake of blood. Cardiac cycle is now complete.
So he mentioned something very important. Why is the wall on the left ventricle thicker than the right ventricle? Why? It has to do with where is the blood flowing to.
Left ventricle should pump blood to all parts of the body.
So it has a harder time, has to have more strength to push and go against the pressure. Unlike the left side that is pushing the blood to the lungs, right? So it has less resistance. Is this more or less clear, the cycle? Right? You can read carefully this part. I tried to put a lot of information also. Two words that you have to keep in mind also. Contraction and relaxation, sometimes we call it systole and diastole, okay, especially when we're going to talk about blood pressure. Now you will say contraction, relaxation, but left and right atrium and left and right ventricle, they both contract and they both relax. In general, when we say systole and diastole, we are referring to the ventricles, okay? When we say one cardiac cycle, all these cycle is one heartbeat, Okay, so one heartbeat is usually all these movement. And it's very quickly, less than a second. So it's a lot of work, a lot of going here and there to move all the blood throughout our system. If you want to see a little more detail of this, I put a little more information here. These are some important events happening in one heartbeat. Okay, for example, in the mid to late diastole, the blood will flow passively into and through the atria into the ventricles. Here will come the blood passively. Blood will come from pulmonary and the systemic circulations. The pulmonary valve and the aortic valve will be closed. The tricuspid valve and the mitral valve will be open. They are filling the ventricles. And the atria contracts and will force blood into the ventricles. Then the pressure within the ventricles will start increasing, closing the valves, the atrioventricular valves, and preventing the backflow. What means backflow? Anyone on this side? What is backflow? He mentioned also preventing backflow from the ventricles to the atria and from the great vessels back into the ventricle. That's why we have the valves, and that's why they are closing up. Okay, with backflow will mean the flow going backwards. Okay, so if these valves are not closed, once the pressure starts increasing here because your ventricle is contracting, if they are not completely closed, your blood will go back, right? Filling again your atrium. And this is not good because then the amount of blood that is supposed to go to the lungs or to the system is not enough. So when atrioventricular pressure is higher than is in the large arteries leaving the heart, the pulmonary and the aortic valves, also called semilunar valves, are forced to open. Okay, this makes a lot of sense, right? We're increasing here the pressure, so we are forcing these valves to open so that we can push all this blood through the great vessels. They're forced open and the blood will rush out of the ventricles. During the systole, the ventricular systole, the atria starts to relax, they will relax. And when the atria relaxes, they will start to fill it again with blood. And the cycle will continue. Okay? The ventricles then will relax, semilunar valves will snap shut, preventing the backflow again to the ventricle so that blood can continue its circulation. So for a moment the ventricles are completely closed, both valves are closed, and the interventricular pressure will drop, so the AV valves, the atrioventricular valves, are forced to open, and again the cycle continues. The ventricle will fill again, they will contract, they will expel the blood. So everybody has our heartbeats, right? So usually we have these two sounds. When you go to the doctor, he has this stethoscope, this device. He will put it in he can use it to hear your heart, your lungs, and so on, sounds in your body. There are two sounds that are audible that you can listen to them with the stethoscope, or even without the stethoscope. I mean, before the stethoscope was invented, people will have just put either their ear or a cone to hear. But we have these two sounds. We call them S1 and S2. In English, they call it lap, dap. Okay, lap, dap. So lap will be S1 and dap will be S2. And what are these sounds? Have you ever wondered why our heart sounds? When you say lap, dap, lap, dap. These are actually closure of the valves. So the first one will be the closure of your mitral and tricuspid valves, the atrioventricular valves. And the second sound, that is the closure of your aortic and pulmonary valves. Okay, so you know. There's another concept that I have to at least mention this, and it's the cardiac output. The cardiac output is the amount of blood that is pumped at each side of the heart in 1 minute. Okay, so the heart works for 1 minute. The amount of blood that is pumped is the cardiac output. And this output will vary depending on the demands of our body. If we are at rest, like right now, our heartbeat is on pace, but if we start running or if we suddenly feel fear or nervous, our heartbeat starts racing, right? So the cardiac output also depends on the heart rate. The cardiac output, this is not carbon monoxide, it's cardiac output is the heart rate times the stroke volume. Okay, what is the stroke volume? It's the volume of blood pumped by each of the ventricles in one heartbeat. Okay, so this is not a very too difficult term to understand. If my heart rate races, then the cardiac output also will increase. But in general, usually we have around 5 to 6 liters per minute of cardiac output. How do I regulate this stroke volume? The stroke volume usually will remain relatively constant, around 60% of the blood that fills in the ventricles. But the more, if I have this muscle, if the cardiac muscle, if I stretch it, then obviously I can expel more volume, right? So the more that a cardiac muscle is stretched, the stronger the contraction. Okay. How do I regulate my heart rate? It's not actually voluntary, but to change the cardiac output, usually it will also depend on the change in the heart rate. The most common way would be of the heart rate through the autonomic nervous system. We mentioned this is sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. So one will increase your heart rate, the other one will reduce your heart rate, right? Some hormones and ions also, like calcium, potassium, or sodium, they can also change your heart rate. And some other physical factors like your age, or if you are doing exercise, or your body temperature. If it's too hot, notice that your heart rate will increase as well. You can carefully see this at home, maybe to see how different factors may affect the heart rate and the stroke volume, and in turn affecting the cardiac output. So we mentioned that the heart is a pump, and it has 4 chambers. We usually refer to them as the left atrium ventricle and the right atrium and ventricle. So sometimes we also say the heart is a double pump, okay, pumping blood to the lungs or pumping blood to the rest of our body. What will happen if one of these sides fails? If one of these sides, for whatever reason, cannot properly function? For example, if the left heart, the left side of your heart fails, what will happen? What was the purpose of the left side? It will pump blood to where?
Whole body.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I cannot pump enough blood to the body. What will happen? Where is the blood coming to fill in the left side?
From lung.
Yes, that's right. So imagine if you are in queue, and then at the beginning of your queue, they are not moving, but they continue coming and coming and coming and coming. So what will happen if my left side is not properly working, if it fails? The blood vessels that are in my lung will become too swollen, okay? Because the blood will start not to circulate properly in my lungs. They will start to swell, the pressure will increase, and some fluid will start to leak. And my lungs will start to congest. So I will end up with a pulmonary congestion. But if my right heart fails, usually what we see would be swollen feet. The congestion will be throughout your body. You will have swollen feet, your ankles, your fingers. So we know that blood vessels, they will carry the blood in this closed system, right? They will begin and ends in the heart. He already mentioned we have major types of vessels, the arteries, the veins, and we also have the capillaries, which are the smaller, if you say, level in the blood vessel systems. The arteries basically carry blood away from the heart. The veins will carry blood towards the heart. And the capillaries are the contact tissue directly into the cells or the tissues, okay? If you want to see them in a figure, think of it like this. The blood is coming here from the artery. They will start branching out, what we call arteriole. Then you have the lower, the most simple level here, the capillaries. And this is the only place where the walls are so thin that the exchange occurs at this level. Once all your cells, your tissue has made use of the oxygen, the nutrients, then these bloods will go through the venule and to the vein back to the heart. In general, this is the structure of the blood vessels. The walls of the arteries and the veins basically have these three layers: tunica intima, media, and externa. But the capillaries here, the capillaries are only composed of endothelium and a very thin basal lamina connective tissue. Okay, why? Because we need the walls to be very thin so that exchange can occur here. What are these intima, media, and externa tunica? This is in general, intima is the inner layer, so it lines the lumen. The lumen is the inside of the blood vessel. Okay, it has a thin layer of endothelium resting on a basement membrane, and the cells fits closely the tunica media. Here, what you have is smooth muscle and elastic fibers. Why is this important? Because remember that your arteries and your veins will also expand or contract. Okay. Large arteries have elastic laminae. In addition to the elastic fibers, smooth muscle will be controlled by sympathetic nervous system. And the tunica externa is mostly fibrous connective tissue. Why do we have this? To support and protect the vessels. So the vessel, think of the arteries and the veins not as rigid structures. It's not like the pipes of your drain system. It's not rigid, okay? Here you can take a closer look to the three layers. And if you compare these from basic artery or basic vein, is quite different from a capillary. right? Which the layers are much simpler. Do you notice anything different from arteries and veins from this figure? No.
Only vein have valve.
Exactly. On the veins, we have valves. On major veins, we will have valves, and we will, in a few moments, see why we have veins. So there are some differences between arteries, veins, and capillaries. Walls of the arteries are thicker than veins. Why would this be? Do you think it has a purpose? Yeah.
Blood press arteries.
Yes, that's right. So the arteries have to support more pressure than the veins. Veins are returning to the heart, but the heart is pumping all this blood into the arteries, so they'll have to resist more pressure. Arterial walls must be strong and stretchy, and the pressure in the veins tends to be low because they're far from the heart. Now, if the blood pressure in the vein is too low, how can we make the blood from the venous system go back to the heart? And this is where the valves come in also, and the muscles. We need the blood returning to the heart, and it's usually going to be against gravity, right? We have to bring back all the blood, for example, from our lower extremities back into the heart. This is against gravity. And there is very low pressure in the veins, but we need them to come back to the heart. So the lumens, the space here, the lumen of the veins are much larger than their corresponding arteries. We will see later in a figure. Usually we have this arterial system, and alongside the arteries runs veins. Many times they have the same name, okay? But they are veins. But the lumen of the veins are much larger than the corresponding arteries. And the large veins will have valves. These valves here that will prevent blood to come back, to backflow. Okay? So larger veins will have valves to prevent backflow of the blood. And another way to force the blood to move along the veins is using the muscles, the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles will enhance the, we call venous return, all the blood in the venous system to going back into the heart by contraction. Okay? We can see here, for example, if we have the muscles and the veins running along the muscles. When you contract your muscles, you're pushing the blood through the system. And because of the valves that they have, it will prevent the blood that is flowing this way to return. Okay, does it make sense? Another way is to inhaling and exhaling. Because of difference in pressure, if we inhale, we increase the blood flow into the thoracic veins. We decrease the pressure, the intrathoracic pressure. Our diaphragm, the muscle here, will contract, and the blood will move up. And when we exhale, the contrary will happen. So we are also helping all this flow of blood through the vein system. Okay? Have you ever seen one of the problems when the valves in the veins are failing? We mentioned we have the valves that are helping to prevent the backflow, right? But what happens when they start failing? Something like this happens, and we call it varicose veins. It could be superficial, it could be deep. Have you ever seen someone with varicose veins? No? Maybe it's more frequently seen when places where people are more exposed to sun, I'm guessing. Maybe in Japan people tend to protect a lot from the sun, so they try to cover themselves very much. But this is not very uncommon to see. Usually it will happen when you are standing for long times. Imagine you have a job and you have to work 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, standing up. People who are obese, they have a lot of weight to carry. Same will be pregnant women. So there will be a pooling of blood in the feet and legs. So it will be much more work for the system to push all this blood back. There will be an inefficient return, a venous return that results from either inactivity or pressure on the veins. Overworked valves give way and the veins become twisted and dilated. Okay? If this is the normal vein, and we have here the valves and the blood flows this way, and then when we release the pressure because of the valves, they do not go through there, we don't have the backflow, right? This is a normal, a healthy valve. But what happens when the valves are not working properly, then the blood will go back again, okay? So pulling there and twisting and dilating the veins. A serious complication from this condition called thrombophlebitis, inflammation of the vein due to a clot. Remember we studied about clot and clotting due to a clot in the vessel with poor circulation. Serious complication from this is a pulmonary embolism. Remember, I think we mentioned embolism before. You have a clot forming and suddenly it breaks free. It could end up in your lungs. Okay.
Is there any treatment for this varicose?
If it's very serious, it could be surgery, temporary relief. Sometimes you can use pressure, like these stockings, but it will depend mostly if it's deep or superficial. Superficial, as far as I know, they don't have much serious complications because they are minor veins, unlike the deeper ones. You don't have to memorize all the arteries in the body. Just for your reference, okay, there are major arteries, all going from the heart and serving different areas of your body. But the aorta, as he already mentioned, is the largest in your body. Okay. It issues from the left ventricle, and it decreases only slightly in diameters as it goes through. And different parts of the aorta, we call these aorta, the different parts are named either by their location or their shape. Like the beginning will be ascending aorta, the arc, descending, thoracic, and so on. This is one of the main and most important artery in your body. And as I mentioned also, we have major veins in the circulation. Usually they go along the arteries. Again, you don't have to memorize the names or the branches of all these veins and arteries. It would be extremely too much and not necessary. I just put some notes on the slide so that you remember. Most deep veins will follow the course of major arteries, and most of names of these veins are identical to their companion arteries. He also mentioned about the superior and inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava will bring blood from heart, head, and arms, basically the upper part. Inferior vena cava receives blood from regions below the diaphragm. Okay. Now there are some special circulations. We will go quickly on these ones. They are very complex systems. Your brain is a very delicate and important organ in your body. If any part of your brain does not receive blood for a period of time, the cells in that area will die. If the cells in that area die, the functions that were conducted by that area will be stopped, impaired. So it's very important to make sure that your brain receives proper amount of blood, right? And the brain is irrigated or receives blood by two pairs of arteries. The internal carotid artery and the vertebral arteries. Here, these two, okay, and these ones. The vertebral artery will join and form this bacillary artery. Basically, they will be in charge of irrigating this part of your brain, your cerebellum, your brainstem. And the internal carotid artery will give rise also to other branches. And this one, middle cerebral and anterior cerebral. If you notice, these sections will serve different parts of your brain, right? So if something happens, if an obstruction happens at this area, as I mentioned, the functions will be complicated or will be affected. There is also this structure called circle of Willis. Imagine if you only have one artery serving this area and a clot happens and you obstruct this artery, then there's no way they will survive, right? The cells in the area are surviving. But we need to have maybe an alternative system or a better system to serve this area, not only through one branch. So we have this, what we call circle of Willis, different branches connecting, so that giving a way that if we have an obstruction in one section, we may be able to still serve the area through the other branches. You don't need to memorize which arteries are really composing the circle of Willis, okay? Just for you to have an idea that there is a complex system irrigating the brain. Other special circulations, like the hepatic portal circulation. This is the route of the blood that will go through the liver before moving into to the heart. The veins from the digestive organs, stomach and so, spleen, pancreas, they will all drain, they will all empty into the hepatic portal vein. Okay? The blood will pass through the liver. Why do we need the blood to pass through the liver? You remember, I think at some point we mentioned the liver will help detox, also will get rid of some waste products. So it's important for them to go through the liver. So the blood passes through the liver before it will re-enter to the regular venous return or system into the heart. The liver will be drained by hepatic veins that will enter into the inferior vena cava. You mentioned superior and inferior vena cava and also the coronary sinus as returning, right? It's correct, but usually because the coronary sinus is less compared to the inferior and superior vena cava, we sometimes do not mention them as contributing to the filling of the right atrium. But it's okay if anybody notices the difference, maybe in the handouts. Okay. Just a word about the arterial pulse. You know that you can feel your pulse in different parts of your body, right? If you touch here your neck or your wrist, you can feel your pulse. This is an alternating expansion and recoil of an artery that occurs with each beat of the left ventricle. I mentioned the left ventricle is the one providing blood to the system. So every time your heart pumps and your arteries expand and contract, you will feel the pulse. They travel through the entire arterial system, influenced by activity. What is postural change? If yes,
how you, it's like how you stand, how you posture of your body.
Yes, if you are standing, if you are laying down, this is a postural change. And it can be felt in any artery lying close to the body surface. Okay? So there are some places where we usually can feel our pulse, as I mentioned. What is the blood pressure? This is the pressure that the blood exerts or puts against the inner walls of the blood vessels. Okay? And if we put here, we mentioned the arteries, capillaries, veins. If we see here the pressure in the aorta, remember this is the great vessel coming out from the heart. Aorta, arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins, and the vena cava, returning to the heart. The pressure will be different in each of these structures, okay? And the highest pressure will be closer to the heart, so in the aorta. So it's the force that keeps blood circulating continuously, even between the heartbeats. And the pressure is highest in the large arteries and continues to drop throughout the system, and the pulmonary pathways reaching zero or negative pressure at the vena cava. How do we measure the blood pressure? I think everybody here has had their blood pressure at least once in their life, right? So because the heart alternately contracts and relaxes, the blood pressure will rise and will fall during each beat. Usually we have these two numbers. The systolic is the pressure at the peak of the ventricular contraction. Systolic pressure, and diastolic is the pressure where the ventricles will relax. Okay, it's usually reported in millimeters of mercury. Okay, and most often measured indirectly. Why we say indirectly? Because we are not having any device into my heart or my great arteries measuring what is the real pressure that I have there. Usually we will use a device to measure our blood pressure, right? So it's measured indirectly by a auscultatory method in the brachial artery of the arm. Usually there are different devices to measure the blood pressure. Have you ever seen this one? This is a very old, one of the very first devices that we used to use to measure blood pressure. It's called sphygmomanometer. It uses mercury. This is mercury, it says the numbers. The cuff is the same as the new ones. This is a portable sphygmomanometer, and these are more maybe likely the ones that you have seen here. So basic things about measuring the blood pressure. We will usually put in our arm the cuff. Okay. So obviously you have to use a cuff with a length enough to cover the arm. So you inflate this cuff. You have this pump here, and you will start inflating this. Okay? So you squeeze these, and air will come here, and will start making pressure into the cuff. You inflate until the cuff pressure will exceed the systolic pressure. Okay, so you inflate these, usually about 120, because the normal systolic pressure is around 120. So you inflate this. Before putting the cuff, they will put a stethoscope here, so that you can listen the sounds coming from the artery. Okay. Once you inflate the cuff over 120, you will not listen, you will not hear anything. And then you slowly start to release the air. Okay? This is the traditional way of doing it, because nowadays you just put your arm and a machine inflates and gives you the results, and that's it. Right? So it's very technical, very high-tech things. But the idea behind all this is this procedure. Once you start releasing the air, the cuff will start de-inflate, so the air will be released from the cuff. So the pressure of compressing the artery will start decreasing. At this point, you will listen a sound. The first sound is the systolic pressure. Okay, this is when a small amount of blood is coming through the artery that was constricted. So the first sound is the systolic pressure. You continue to release the air from the cuff, because you start listening the sound, and you continue hearing the sounds. But when the artery is no longer constricted, so all the air from the cuff is out, you're not constricting the artery, you can no longer hear any sound, and that is the diastolic pressure. Okay, so basically this is how we make the blood pressure measurement. Okay, traditionally we are using one of the old ways like this one, or even this one, because here you will see the numbers here. If it's not this column of mercury, you can see it on the round one. You will see the either the column of mercury or it's like a clock, and one of the needles will come slowly. You have to check at which point it starts the sound and at which point it disappears. So the arterial blood pressure will be related to the cardiac output. We mentioned the cardiac output is the heart rate times the stroke volume, and the peripheral resistance. Okay, the peripheral resistance is the amount of friction the blood faces as it flows through the blood vessels. So the constriction of the blood vessels will be related to either the sympathetic nervous system if there's a constriction of the vessels, or if they are more hardened with age, your vessels will start to be more stiff, so you will have a higher peripheral resistance. Or if you have an increased blood volume or your blood is more thick, then it's again increased peripheral resistance, and these will in turn affect your blood pressure. Blood pressure can also be affected by age, by your weight, by exercise, your position, as we mentioned, postural changes, or some drugs that you're taking, legal or illegal. So it's important when you're going to have your blood pressure measured to be at rest, maybe not have to drink coffee or alcohol, because all these can affect your blood pressure. Okay? There are other factors that affect blood pressure. We mentioned neural factors, the sympathetic nervous system, some renal factors, temperature. Why? Because the cold will constrict your vessels, the heat will dilate your vessels, some chemicals or drugs, illegal or illegal. And some also may argue the diet can influence your blood pressure. What would be normal blood pressure? Usually between these ranges. We may have low blood pressure or higher blood pressure. We can call it hypotension when the systolic pressure is lower or below 110. Or hypertension if the systolic pressure is above 140. Okay? Especially hypertension can be dangerous if it's in a chronic condition. It will affect your eyes, your kidneys, and other organs, or your brains also. Okay, is there any questions here? It's a lot to take in. Please review carefully at home. Okay. The main points, some new names, also new terms. If you are not familiar with them, I would suggest for you to review the cardiac cycle, what it happens, how it happens. It will help you also to memorize the structures. Okay? If there's nothing else, comments or questions, please wake up, you can go home. Thank you very much. Who is next on the...
Yeah.
You. Okay, thank you very much. Only you? Someone else? No.
Only me.
No, Shin Suzuki. Who is Shin Suzuki? Kaito Osaka. No. Oh yeah, you're right. 12 only have one person. Okay then, so next week we'll have you. Don't put on. Are you using the ones you sent me already?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Then I can print them. Yes?
Huh?
Your presentation, can I print it already, or you're going to make any modifications?
Please print.
Okay. Thank you very much.